Thank you for being here, Sarah.
Oh, thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much. So you were 4 when your family moved from Ireland to the States with Molly and your dad.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? Because obviously that's a huge move.
Yeah, I mean, it was really exciting at the beginning. You know, moving to America, the weather was great, the houses were huge. And I remember running around my new bedroom really excited, and Molly and my dad, hand in hand, picking out furniture and pointing where they were going to put it. So at the beginning, it was like a new beginning.
And Molly was originally employed as the au pair, and then it developed into a romantic relationship between your dad and her. And initially, you had a very good relationship with her.
Yeah, I mean, she was the au pair, so, you know, she cooked us dinner and took us, you know, my dad would take us to school and she'd collect us. But most of my memories, because I was so young when we first became a unit as a family, you know, looking back on it now, it probably wasn't a healthy relationship.
How was she then as the mother figure to you and your brother?
Molly was very manipulative, and she would pit me and Jack against each other. Like, you can see it in the Netflix documentary. In the video, she says, "Oh, Sarah, you're 1 year, 2 years old," and then she starts making fun of Jack, and that's how young it started. And it went so far as, you know, if Jack did good in a swim meet, that he was the favourite child, and she would give him all the glory, and then I would be, you know, the little shrimp, as she used to call me, when I didn't do well in swimming.
I think one of the things that their lawyers have said about this, because you've talked about the fact it felt like she pitted the two of you against each other, is that those allegations don't sit necessarily with what you have said. You've described her lovingly in forensic interviews, and those were interviews that, when it came to the court case, were found to be truthful.
And, yeah, those interviews are out there, but I lied in those interviews, and I'll always have to live with that. But Molly had gotten into our ears at such a young age. Molly started telling me that my dad killed my birth mom when I was 6 years old. She told me my dad was a bad man. Molly also taught me that vomiting was okay, to keep myself skinny for swimming when I was 6, and that shoplifting was okay. So I believe that Molly had a very troubling relationship with the truth, and that was also put into evidence and in courtrooms.
Were you aware when you were so young that the relationship was starting to disintegrate? Were you aware of that? What was it like in the house?
It was always tense, but it was our normal. You know, I didn't know that having a ball of anxiety was not normal for a 7-year-old and 8-year-old. My dad was always extremely loving to me and Jack, and he did try his best with Molly, bringing her flowers home, and, you know, it was really difficult to keep Molly happy, and if you didn't, you knew about it. And it wasn't until I moved back to Ireland with my aunt and uncle, who I now call my parents, Tracy and David, that I realised what a normal family unit looks like. Because I was so young, it was just what I thought was normal.
Just what you'd grown up with.
Yeah.
To take us back to the night when you tragically lost your dad, what do you remember?
I remember everything from that night. I remember being woken up by a police officer, Corporal Clay Dagenhart. And he introduced himself, and he was quite nice, and he told me that I had 2 options, that I could walk down the stairs backwards with my eyes closed, or he could carry me down the stairs with my eyes closed. And I wasn't feeling very well that night, so I asked him to carry me down the stairs, and I remember he lifted me into his arms, and we went out to the landing, and it was like there was dozens of people inside the house. There was fuzzing from police officers, walkie-talkies and boots, and people talking. And as he carried me down the stairs, he covered my face with his hand and put my head in the nape of his neck. And we got up to near the bottom of the stairs, and it just went completely silent. And that stayed that way until we got to the basement stairs.
So you were 8 years old at this time. The reason he was doing that was because the scene of what had happened to your father was
at the bottom
so
of the stairs,
extraordinary and violent that he just didn't want you to see any of that not even a glimpse of it.
Yeah, and I'm extremely lucky for the fact that he did that. And he was... I couldn't have asked for a better officer to have been there with me that night.
Then, after the event, you were called in, and both you and your brother Jack had to give separate interviews together. What did they ask you, and what did they say? What did you say?
So we were first interviewed in Bobby Martin's house, and the Martins were warned that we would have this interview, which they're not meant to be. So me and Jack were sat down by the Martins, and Molly told us that we had to say that Dad was a bad man and that he hit her, and that if we didn't say those things, that we would be separated and that we'd never see each other again. So we were really scared, and we lied. I told social workers that Molly told me that my dad hit her, and Molly told me that my dad was a bad man. And
so you essentially, in that interview as 8-year-olds, and you and your brother, you backed up what Molly had said to the police as well.
Yes.
But
then only about 3 weeks later, when we got back to Ireland, we recanted those statements.
In regards to that response from her lawyers, basically the legal court came up to the conclusion that the night that your father died, Molly had acted in response to threat, coercion, provocation and duress from Jason Corbett. The reasons the court sentenced her in a mitigated range for voluntary manslaughter, which is what she ended up going to prison for eventually.
And they were originally charged with second-degree murder, but those charges were changed to voluntary manslaughter for Molly.
So, I mean, you and Jack have to live with the fact that, I mean, you were such a young age as well, but you made comments in those interviews that eventually got brought up in the second court case that led to a change in their sentencing. Yeah,
and we have to live with the fact that, you know, words that we said are part of the reason why the Martins are walking free today. And I suppose that's why I wrote A Time for Truth, because it gave me a chance to just be completely honest about everything and put it in a book and let people read it. And, you know, we didn't have a voice. I wasn't allowed to give evidence. I wasn't allowed to be a character witness. I was under a gag order, so I couldn't even talk to my friends or my family or media about...
So how hard was that as well? Because this case was going all around the world. Of course, it happened in America, but your family from Ireland, and I imagine you're in all the newspapers and you've got to go to school, but you can't, as you say, you can't talk about it.
Yeah, and it was extremely difficult because you can't defame the dead. So the Martins could say anything about my dad. And I guess that's why there's so much out there about my dad's character that isn't true. And it made it very difficult for my family to sit in courtrooms and hear this completely fabricated narrative about my dad's personality, because you can't change that. You can't defame the dead. And, you know, the Martins brought my birth mom into it and my grandfather into it, and all of those people that I loved have passed away since. And I just think that really shows the character of the people that the Martins are.
What was that like for you and your brother? Because then you moved back to Ireland and you get taken in by your aunt.
Yeah.
That must have been just absolutely awful for you guys.
It was probably the best thing that happened to me.
Because
I was put into a safe family environment, and I was extremely lucky. Tracy and David took us in like we were their own kids. They have never treated us differently. They have 2 of their own sons, who I now call my brothers. You know, and another thing was that they never said a bad thing about the Martins. You know, they listened to us say that we missed Molly and that we loved Molly, because we did love Molly. And it wasn't until I think about 2 or 3 years ago that I was having an absolute meltdown, and I was begging Tracy to say something negative about Molly, and she said, "I don't like that woman, she killed my brother." And that was it. And they gave us the opportunity to make up our own minds, to decide what we felt towards the Martins, and I will always be grateful for that, because I suppose why I'm sitting here today is because I was able to make up my own opinion.
You didn't, Sarah, get the chance to give evidence, but when they had the retrial, you and your brother were able to read out victim impact statements.
Yeah.
So you were able to explain how this had impacted on you. What was it like for you and Jack to come face to face with them again? Because you hadn't had any contact, had you, since you'd left America?
Other than Molly trying to fly planes over our school and going on social media, and she tried to contact friends of mine that I sat next to in school, which made it very difficult to make friends. but we had never got in contact with her. But I think it was more so for me, I felt like I wasn't afraid of them anymore. They had taken up so much space in my life, and I didn't want to give them the power over me anymore. And it was very difficult to read the victim impact statement. There was a lot of emotion, but I think it finally gave me a chance to say something in a courtroom.
Yeah, which is one of the things that you've actually done with the book too. Yeah. It must help you cope with the entire situation.
The book, the only way I can describe it is I've cried a lot less since I wrote the book, because I took all of my childhood trauma and everything bad that happened to me and put it into one funnel and looked at it. And it made me realise that, you know, this is happening to people all over the world, and that's really important, that, you know, people who are going through similar situations or really difficult situations know that, you know, you can get help. You can find someone that will listen to you, and it will be okay. You know, you will be able to find the light at the end of the tunnel and have a normal life. I will always live with my trauma, and I will always have this next to me, but I mean, everybody has good and bad days, whether they've been through traumatic experiences or not. Do you know, and I think the book has helped me realise that.
Extraordinary amount of strength involved.
Yes, absolutely.
Just what you've said there, Sarah. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
And sharing a bit